Buonasera a tutti, good evening and welcome to the Italian Radio Hour. Io sono Viviana and I would like to welcome back our regular listeners and also welcome any new listeners. Also, be sure to like us on Instagram and Facebook at Italian Radio Hour and subscribe to our YouTube channel to catch up on any past video interviews. Vorrei dare il benvenuto ai nostri ascoltatori da tutto il mondo, grazie per essere con noi anche oggi mentre continuiamo il nostro viaggio per l'Italia e la cultura italiana. In this episode of the Italian Radio Hour, we sit down with Brooklyn-born Italian-American artist John Avelluto, whose work playfully and provocatively explores Italian-American identity, memory, and culture through painting, trompe-l'œil, and multimedia installations. John's latest exhibition, AI and AEO, Recent Works by John Avelluto, curated by Dr. Caterina Pierre at the Kingsborough Art Museum, examines the intersections of artificial intelligence, storytelling, and memory, presenting viewers with fictionalized narratives of Italian-American life that are both whimsical and thought-provoking. From his early explorations of Impasta Handbags to his contributions to the book and project Italianità, to his reflections on food, gestures, and diasporic identity, John combines humor, history, and hyperrealistic artistry to engage audiences in questions of culture, heritage, and belonging. In our conversation, we'll dive into his process, his inspirations, his ongoing work, and his new initiative, Piace, a progressive Italian-American group shaping community and conversations today. So don't go anywhere, ma prima pubblicità. Parli italiano? Do you want to learn, improve, or master your Italian? Istituto Mondo Italiano can help. Located in the heart of Regent Square, Mondo Italiano offers small group classes and one-on-one private tutoring, in person or online, to help you learn Italian in no time. Visit us online at istitutomondoitaliano.org. John, welcome to the program. Benvenuto. How are you today?
Very good, Viviana. Thank you very much for having me. I very much appreciate you having me on the show today.
Okay, so you grew up in Bay Ridge, if I'm not mistaken. So how did that neighborhood shape your visual language?
Well, actually, I live in Bay Ridge currently. I've always
Okay.
had a relationship with here. I grew up a couple of neighborhoods over in Gravesend, which
Okay.
is right near the Coney Island area.
Mhm.
And growing up there was at the time it was largely Italian American. There would have been some names, famous names that have come from there, but not for the right reasons. As Carlo Gambino had gone to my parish when I was younger, but we came up with a lot of really great cultural things like L&B Spumoni Gardens, who is still continuing their legacy in pizza making, sfincione style. It was really a community of people that were very tight-knit. It felt very much like an Italian family where everybody sort of knew each other in the town. And it was, it kind of was diverse, even though it was very Italian, because in Brooklyn, the neighborhoods were really butt up, not too far from each other. So from one angle, we had Trump Village, which was housing that was built right up until the edge of Coney Island and right across the street from me, which had a number of different people of different backgrounds in there, largely a lot of Ukrainian and Russian. And then we had the project houses on the outskirts of it. So, in the parks in the neighborhood, a lot of people met and there was a lot of exchange there. So I think that very much influenced the way that I grew up and the way I saw things.
Yes. So at what point did you first realize that your cultural background could become artistic material?
When I went to grad school. I think that for a long time there was a part of me that wanted to not really show my Italian American side. I think it was not within my family anyways. It was a matter of pride and shame. Where I grew up, my grandfather, who was born in Ventimiglia di Sicilia, around in vicino di Palermo, he was very staunch on the fact that we not learn Italian, that we were American. However, all of the Sicilian traditions in the household continued. and I grew up with that dialect in the house. So I learned a lot from that. But you know, it was not until grad school to when I was in Brooklyn College. I'm a townie. I grew up here. I went to school here, both undergrad and graduate. And none of the other students not only were of Italian American background or share the experience that I had, they weren't from Brooklyn in Brooklyn College. So out of an entire graduate school place setting, I had nobody that was similar to me, which I think was good because I believe it brought up a lot of self-reflection. And within there, I was kind of interested in pop culture and how the signs and symbology of pop culture are shared. I wanted to treat the Italian American, the very, very wealthy and diverse amounts of symbols and symbology in Italian Americanism. I felt was a really great material to use within my work and could be used very similarly. And I stopped caring so much whether or not a lot of other people shared in this background with me because I think they could be very jarring images and reflect one's subconscious as well and be open to interpretation too.
Yes, indeed. So I guess you have come to peace with kind of the tug of war, I think it's called, between the family wanted the kids to assimilate, but you in somehow preserving the identity, not only through the family traditions, but through your artwork. Some of it, which we can see right behind you. I'm also using a screen saver with one of your work. I will try to get some images, but can you tell us about, the foods and the dialects, the gesture, the process of creating these very seductive, visually seductive pieces of work that they're so real. They're acrylic. I mean, it's pretty amazing. So I'm gonna try to see because it's hard to tell, a piece of, the cannoli and the mortadella without really seeing some elements. So tell us a little bit about your creative approach.
Well, I am first and foremost when it comes to my artistic practice, I've always been interested in sort of textural works and the idea of sculpture, but I was somehow trapped in painting, and I say this in retrospect. I love the materiality, I love the feel of things, and, the tactility of the material is something that is very seductive to me. So I was trying to figure out ways to sort of make these textures more evident through painting. There's the gesture in painting, but I wanted it to be more expressive. And I looked at a lot of people who did a lot of work in Italy, like Cy Twombly, who was using all gesture, and then the work of J. DeFeo was really fantastic for me because that was just it was a painting, kind of, but it was more of a sculpture. I mean, it weighed like 2,000 pounds. And they had to crane it out of her studio when she was complete with it. And those kind of works, and I'm referencing a work called The Rose. Those works for me had a lot of power, and I wanted to push that to its edge. And I thought that, with using acrylic, I would clean up my glass palette and I would just, instead of cleaning it up while it was wet, I would clean it when it was dry because it was so much easier because acrylic doesn't adhere to glass. It is non-porous. So I'm able to just wait till it's dry and peel it all off in one film. So taking that, I sort of jumped forward to, all right, well, what if I sculpt this stuff and I make elements in my paintings that are like this? And the professor at the time, William T. Williams, who was a fantastic painter, and I miss him sorely. He had introduced me to the work of Jack Whitten, who recently had a retrospective at the MoMA. And he had worked a lot with acrylic tiling, where he would take just slabs of acrylic paint, cut it up, and sort of like rearrange them into a composition on the canvas. And I took some of those cues, and I really think that I was left off with like a lot of gesture and a lot of sort of abstract expressionism, and for lack of a better terms at the time. So I changed that, and I said, well, I'm wondering if I could make these into something more believable and realistic so that I could have this idea of something that is really hyper fake at the time. I wanted this idea of something that was so real, but also so kitschy at the same time. And I thought to myself, like I really love the idea of symbology in Italian work. This idea of, going to La Festa, Festa della Santa Rosalia on 18th Avenue. And, you get the t-shirts there that says, like 100% Italian or FBI, full-blooded Italian. And I'm like, well, the symbols that people wear on them that express, this shared sort of background we have as a symbol. But I'm like, well, anybody could put that t-shirt on, you know, anyone could wear a cornetto. So what is it that makes an Italian? So the idea of making these foods that I had grown up with that were so indicative of Italianness, I wanted to sort of play that and make abstract compositions out of something that is truly fake, where you're second guessing whether or not there's space there, and there is. The work that's up right now has, those are all 3D elements. That's not shadows painted into there. Even the marble backdrop is not marble. So I wanted to play around with these things and experiment back and forth between what is real and what is fake. Like, it's really 3D. A lot of people reference this work as trompe-l'œil, but it's not
Mhm.
trompe-l'œil because that's a trick of the eye. This is more of a, I believe it was in the last article written about my work, Nicola Lucchi, the director of Magazzino Italian Art, had referenced the
Mhm.
work as trompe de pensée. So really, it plays with your mind because you're not imagining that there's space there, but the actual material itself is not it.
Mhm.
So, please, do you have any questions?
No, 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 absolutely. It just, your work creates different emotions. It can be affectionate, it can be critical, it can be both. And so you're spoken about Fugazi, and how does imitation play into the ideas of authenticity?
Can you repeat that question? I'm sorry, the
Yes,
last
so
part
you have
sort of
spoken
came out.
about Fugazi, okay?
Yes.
And so how does imitation play into ideas of authenticity?
Oh, big time. I think that a lot of people, well, particularly my family, right? My father was worked in restaurants his entire life and then became a co-owner. So he was always obsessed, no matter how long he had been here in this country, with the idea of this is not Italian. We go out to an Italian American restaurant being like, whoa, what is this? He'd get an espresso without any spuma on top and it's filled to the brim. He's like, what is this? Come on. And I'm like, that this is not Italy. The difference in what expectation is here and the lifestyle here has made a product that is very, very different. And also,
Mhm,
we aren't in Italy, and it's questionable whether or not that reproduction is possible in the first place, right? So that idea had always been planted in my head because my father was saying like, this was not it. This is it. And he had a restaurant that he focused on food from his town, from Mola di Bari. So,
mhm,
this idea of playing back and forth between what is real and what isn't, because a lot of this stuff too, for me, is real. The it's inauthenticity is authentic in a way. We use in this country, a lot of people always say, "Oh, muzzadel," like the bad spelling, the gabagool. It's a form of communication that has evolved. We're not in Italy anymore. We're Italian Americans, and there's been shifts because we've been surrounded by other cultures, other communities, other factors that lead into our daily life, which has, I wouldn't say evolve, because evolve means that it's like going forward and there's a progression. There is a progression, right? It has moved here to be this thing and it communicates. So I think that it has the same utility. And I grew up with these things. And right now I'm even putting on a very nice voice for you. If I have two drinks and I get very familiar with you, Viviana, I'm going to start talking in my Brooklyn accent, which I became very aware was not normal when I started leaving Brooklyn and went to work with my father when he had a restaurant in Westchester.
Yeah, I think
And
I
not
think
many people understood
yeah.
me.
I think you are raising a good point. I mean, it's and this is probably what I'm kind of also advocating in my own little backyard, so to speak, is that Italian American culture, language, traditions, emojis, hand gestures are its own thing. So why don't we create even a dictionary of Italian American? And obviously, there seems to be, at least depending on where you are in the US, predominantly the exposure to Southern dialects. Okay.
Yes.
So perhaps someone from Piedmont is like, I'll never do that. I will never say that. But okay, where are the Piemontese in the United States, right? And again, if there is this collective effort to legitimize the Italian American culture as, again, its own thing, its own, I would love to see restaurants say Italian American cuisine, not to say, oh, because you're not Italian, it's because you have created your own thing. But if we keep on just dragging it, it's like it's not Italian and we call it Italian. We set the wrong expectations. So the Italians are going to be upset because it's not really Italian. And Italian American
Sure.
culture, wherever it is not getting the proper recognition. So I don't know. That's probably my own little
No, totally understandable. And as my job as an artist, I see it as I'm supposed to confuse these things, right? I'm supposed to sort of like make this gray area where one thing is this and that, not this or that, right? I'm supposed to like smash these things together and make an uncomfortable space and that's really what gets you thinking critically about both of those things. So, my position is I respect your position and I agree with it. But I just want to confuse things more, and I have to also sit myself within these very political conversations and say, I view this as sort of an outsider putting this stuff together, and I
Mhm.
want to sort of like make it into kind of a mess. But I definitely would love to see an American version of this, of Bruno
Oh yeah,
Minotti's
yeah,
work, and see how
yeah.
it translates into contemporary Italian Americanism.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
we're
So yeah, let's actually talk about some emoji culture, your impasta handbags and the global spread of Italian gestures through emoji culture. So tell us a little bit about what they mean to you. And again, I'm also using, unfortunately, the image gets cut off, but you do have two faces, due facce. Behind me, your work. So tell us a little bit about also, if taken out of context, do these, even the hand gestures, still maintain the significance or do they gain a new significance?
Yeah, I think that those are subject to the same, especially with emoji culture, because those are usually approved international languages. Like we have a set of emojis used on products that go throughout the world. So this lexicon is certainly used and misused consistently. And the best example I have when I was thinking about a lot of this stuff was this,
Mm-hmm.
which is very popular at rock concerts, and people don't understand that because, it started, I think if I looked at the history the correct way, was Ronnie James Dio, when he took over Ozzy Osbourne's position in Black Sabbath, started doing this to the crowd. And he said it referenced his grandmother, who he thought this meant the devil. So it's
Yeah.
the devil horns, and to put a curse on somebody. Yeah, that's correct. And he started using it with the crowd, who then started doing it at every other rock concerts, and then started doing it further. You could go to like a Beach Boys concert, and like they'll be doing this, not necessarily at heavy metal concerts. And the context is completely lost. I doubt many people, going to see. I'm going to date myself here, like Britney Spears, are going to I'll say somebody contemporary, Chappelle Roan concert, is going to be doing this And they're not going to really know what this means. And if you are of Italian descent, you probably do know that that means a cuckold. And I'm sure that they're not wishing that upon the people on stage. So if that is possible, right, where it's become this new thing, it means now rock and roll, right? Um, what what else will? You know, we saw that now this gesture
Yes.
is now very popular. It got approved, I believe, 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, into the lexicon of emojis. And I'm pretty sure that in 5 years from now and 10 years from now, we will have a new meaning for what that is. And I
Yeah,
see it
and
misused constantly.
yeah, and also, first of all, thank you for the explanation of why this has become such a positive sign here. Because sometimes here you have people using it to say this and that. It's like the first time that I was working at high tech, someone did it. So it was this and that. It's like, may I please just don't use that. But now I understand that it was how it evolved into a positive context, and also the the question, it's the what, the where, there is, because it's been reintroduced so much. Even Italians that would normally not use it started to use it because now is what is expected of us. That's what I notice now in Reels and Instagrams. People that normally, even potentially I would do a finishing a video with such and such guests, right? In a context where
Yep.
I wouldn't do it. I have a beautiful publication with me, which you can't really see much of it because the cover is still part of
Put it in
your
the center, right here.
in the
It'll
center.
show
Let's
up.
see.
There you go.
Okay. So you figure out you work the magic. So this is Italianità. It just came. It's going to go into the library of the Italian Culture Hub that we have here in Pittsburgh. Contemporary art inspired by the Italian immigrant experience by Joanne Matera. And there is 59 artists, most Italian American, a few from throughout the diaspora. And on page 38, if I'm correct, it's you. So tell us a little bit about this beautiful collaboration. You had the Take the Cannoli, you had also the Italian cookies, rainbow cookies, and you have also some very interesting pieces. They mix messages, probably is in constructing knowledge. I'm going to try to see if I can show it. And I would like to see more of it. Tell us a little bit about this, more of these other, this is Jen Drasile, that's you. Okay, so it is the, what's the correct pronunciation of Fugazi? Am I mispronouncing it?
I pronounce it Fugazi, and there is no best
Fugazi,
pronunciation.
okay.
I guess that's really it. And I think the only place you wind up even seeing that outside of a band that called themselves Fugazi, which was a punk band from the early '80s, I believe, or late '70s, is in Donnie Brasco.
Okay.
You have Al Pacino's character talking to Johnny Depp about fake diamonds, and he calls it Fugazi. So and then comedy ensues. So with the book, though, I think Joanne Matera deserves a large applause for putting that together. It's really her book and her vision that put that together. Joanne is a writer, and she wrote Vita, a book that came out before that, which is a story about her life growing up as a queer Italian American. And she decided, like, well, and she noticed first, really, there's no space for Italian Americans in the arts space. There isn't something that is quintessentially or sort of unifying them. And she really wanted to sort of catalog what people were doing out there from Italian backgrounds, and seeing the types of work that came up. And I believe there are two different categories even within that book. And you said 59 artists. I believe it's even growing to, I believe it's around 75 now. And it's on the website. The book is like those 51 artists and the website has more consistently added to it as she
Oh,
meets
okay.
more
So it's
of our
a
people.
live, a live
Yes.
project. Yeah, yeah. So let's take a quick break, and we'll be right back, and we'll continue talking about the project, and also I believe was the a legacy of making at the Calendar Institute. So we'll be right back.
Do you love Italian food? Want to learn the secrets of homemade pasta, sauces, and traditional recipes, just like Nana used to make? At Mondo Italiano, our authentic Italian cooking classes bring the taste of Italy right to Pittsburgh. From fresh pasta to regional specialties, every class is a delicious journey through Italy's culinary traditions. Spots fill quickly, so reserve your seat today. Call us at 412-478-2681 or find us online. Mondo Italiano, where Italy comes alive one dish at a time.
Un caffè, per favore. For more than 35 years, Pittsburgh has started its mornings with La Prima Espresso. From freshly roasted beans from around the world to the perfect espresso or cappuccino, every cup is crafted with care. Stop by and enjoy the warmth of our baristas and familiar faces, or bring the taste of Italy home. Order online today at laprima.com. La Prima Espresso, Pittsburgh's coffee. Okay, we're back with John Avelluto. We are talking about Italianità from an artistic perspective, being part of a project that involves different Italian-American artists, that is a living entity, as we're just saying. And I don't know if, again, correct me, this was a result of the exhibition, A Legacy of Making at the Calendar Institute. I think that was first, and then eventually the Italianità project came about it, or perhaps not, perhaps reverse.
Other way around. Yes.
Okay.
Italianità had come out, and Joanne then thought, well, we need to show this work. We need to get this show on the road. And with that, she put together these exhibitions that feature, because it's very difficult to get 51 artists' works together in one place. So we would show it in different parts of the US with artists that are more local to that area, so that we could get a more cohesive and easier to handle exhibition together and show these works live. The project at the Calandra showed a lot of people that were from, the tri-state area, particularly, that were around. And she had a couple of other ones too. There was one at Regis College and at Connecticut College as well. And there is one coming up in New Jersey in the coming year.
Okay, so wonderful. I was going to ask you if there was already something that had been put in the books. And how did how seeing the work and in dialogue with other Italian American artists changed or affected the way that you see your own practice?
Well, it's weird, because I love all the work in the exhibition, and I feel, though, the references that I'm making are very overt, and they're very much talking about, it's kind of unmistakable that I'm talking about Italian American things. And I don't think that that is a subject matter that is particularly shared by many of my contemporaries. So seeing that, I've sought out more and more artists that are referencing these things and come from this background, or not. Or what does that even mean? But just referencing these items of Italian Americana. So I felt like, being alone in these things, to sort of like turn the dial up even further, almost double down on it, just because, like, I feel like I should not hold anything back. And, the more I see of my tendencies toward humor, toward rigorous practice, and trompe-l'œil, let's just push those things up and push them beyond even the materials that I'm using. So I think that's how I was affected by that show. And I've reached out, and I've really scoured a lot of the internet for other artists that are doing the same thing. And I'm actually trying to curate a show at the Calandra next year called Gavones.
Oh, yes.
Which will reference Italian American foods, people who explicitly do so. And it was very difficult finding artists that specifically do so. It's only about 7 artists that I've been able to find. I'm sure there are more out there, but it is a task. But hopefully we're able to find more and more, and we turn this into something that we can really show out with, and really show this fact that we are Italian American in the art space, and referencing our background and using it as a means to expand the culture.
So perhaps we'll put out a call for whoever is going to listen to this interview that might be an artist to reach out to you. We'll put your contact details or a way of addressing you. Something I didn't mention before, but I think I've read somewhere. Some of you had also some Byzantine passion when you were a little kid, looking at books. Am I too far from reality?
No, you're not too far. No. My father, and my parents got divorced early, but when my father was living at home with me, he worked in Little Italy at a restaurant that's still there called Il Cortile. Okay. And there was all types of shops that actually one of them still does exist that sell Italian items, music, books, saint statues, all the paraphernalia of an Italian tourist shop. But they carried this one booklet called, I believe it was published by L'Idea, and it was called I Grandi Musei d'Europa. And it contained little pamphlets of all of the great museums throughout Italy and the rest of Europe. So the Uffizi, of course, is in it. So I got to look at a lot of the works, older works, not only the Renaissance, but from beyond that, going far back to Giotto, and also the Byzantine artworks. And those things really did affect me, because I had to also imagine, I couldn't go see those works. I had the Met Museum, but nothing prepared me for actually seeing those works. So a lot of it had to exist in my head. So I think that really had a big part to play in what I thought was Italian, especially the fact that I was beyond my community, that these works went everywhere in the world, and are known all throughout Europe, not only in Italy, but in Prado, in the Louvre. You have these Italian masterworks. And that sort of thing really, really did interest me and affect my thinking about artworks.
Wonderful. Is there something perhaps that you're leaving behind and something else you're moving toward?
Right? In my art practice?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that there's so much that I'm interested in my arts practice, and there are so many possibilities, probably more than I probably should endeavor upon. But as the kids say today, YOLO, you only live once. So I am going to probably be making a lot of paintings that I've always wanted to make outside of these works, which are just basically abstract expressionists, but quasi-realist scenes of tables and table settings. That's probably going to be next on my list of things, and things that aren't necessarily quintessentially Italian or Italian American. Although I have a funny feeling that just because I am who I am, that will always have a veil on top of these works. So those, you'd be able to even read into those as being Italian American, but those table scenes are something that I've been drawing for quite some time, and I'd like to get to.
Yeah. Your creation, I've seen some of your work, they look like medals, and it's a pretty complex process, and it's kind of, you have to get it right, because otherwise all that material might get wasted, right? Can you tell us, can you elaborate a little more on those pieces? I'm trying to find some images, but
Well, let's see the ones where you said the medals. I'm assuming that you're talking about the Trinacria.
Yes.
Yes,
The symbol of
I've
Sicily.
yes.
You know.
So, I wanted to reinterpret these things with contemporary Italian American symbols. And what I was left with was like this nonsensical, almost overtly offensive sort of trinacria. Instead of with the legs, it has hands, and they're all making a different gesture, from this to the middle finger, which I'm not going to give you. You could imagine that in there. And then these other emojis, which have also taken on new, more racy meanings in today, but are also used as epithets in colloquial Italian, like the eggplant.
Yes.
And I thought that having that in the work too, someplace, the idea of the malocchio has always been interesting to me, and the eye in the center of it rather than the face in which the arms are emanating in the center of the trinacria. And making that into a chain, which for me, having the small hairs in the background, with the chain like lying in the middle of what is supposed to be, you're going to interpret as the panel as a chest or a piece of human flesh. So and that bears with it its own temporal and cultural ideas. That's something that maybe in 1995 and further back in time, through the 70s, was symbolic of an Italian American male simply wearing a medallion of either the head of Jesus or something else like a giant corno staying between the hairs on the chest. And sort of this was a funny way to sort of address that, and to also mix up these symbols in one place. Again, comedy is a huge part of my work because of these sort of, I want to say, stereotypes and cliches are silly, right?
Yeah.
And when you only are left with things like the stereotype to define somebody within, taken to the extreme, it becomes even more silly, right?
Yeah.
So why not push it there in order to show just how silly the original cliches are?
Yeah.
So I really wanted to get into that, and I thought that this would be an interesting way. And to address your point about making a medallion out of paint, yeah, you have to be very, very careful with how your process goes, because if you mess up layers, then you're going to throw out a lot of paint. A couple of gallons goes into each one of those metals. And then at the end of it, my drawing is done on a computer. So I do all my drawings with my finger on a computer trackpad, and then they're translated onto those surfaces with a laser. So I use a laser to engrave my drawings onto those films of paint a lot of times. So there are many different levels of relief within the painting itself. So you also have to make sure that it survives that process. And dealing with lasers and paint is always, it's never really predictable. So.
No, I saw a couple of things about it, and I was really, really, really impressed. And again, just as you said, sometimes using these stereotypes that are silly, take it to the next level, do allow also for some reflection afterwards. So it's not just the laughing or whatever. I wanted to congratulations on the idea, on the creation of Piace. I would like to spend some time talking about what Piace is, and how it started. What need did you feel that needed to be covered with this new organization, and what does Piace stand for?
Thank you very much for that question, Viviana. Piace stands for the Progressive Italian American Cultural Exchange. So, I've spoken to so many of my peers throughout the years about, social clubs and how difficult certain people found to be involved with the social clubs and the heritage organizations, forgetting about, it didn't really stand or resonate with what they wanted to do, and culturally, and their involvement was kind of inhibited at that point too. So I understood that. I had tried to become part of several organizations, and it became difficult, especially with, language barriers. A lot of them are like, well, to be part of the Malays social club, it's learning Malays would be a good idea, and that was not something that a lot of people were learning. It's a very special person that learns how to speak the Malays dialect. So they're dated, and that's not to say not valid. They are, but they are temporal. They address people from a certain era, and that's great too. But there was a lack of space too for peers of mine that are artists. There is no grant making organization of Italian American culture that is making grants to the creation of new works. I should say that NIAF has won in film the De Laurentiis Award, but it sort of limits the scope of the creation of work because it has to show Italians and Italian Americans in a positive light. And that's not to say that you wouldn't or would, but to put limits on a work is really hard for it to be considered an artistic work rather than propaganda. So we wanted a place that could speak to Italian Americans in the arts and use it in a way that culture can expand, because we've all moved. I have many Italian American friends who are many different hyphens that are from, Trinidad and Tobago and Sicilian American, and their children don't sort of look like or have the same exact sort of parameters around their Italianness that we see reflected by many, many organizations and even in popular culture. And I think that we can start thinking about Italian Americanism just in the same way that we forgave gabagool and mortadella. Well, then we've been here for so many generations. We're so many generations deep, and we are bound to have expanded what the cultural horizon is for Italian Americans. So with Piace was finding a bunch of people that felt like they needed a space to put that language. And I think the idea of us taking on the cultural heritage, what we've seen in the past, and saying and treating it as an arts material in and of itself. Well, how do we expand on that? How do we talk about that? How do we go out in the streets and participate in things that show us, visually Italian American heritage in a new way, instead of talking about only gabagool and pasta and things like that? What are the new ways we can express ourselves through food culture, through the culinary arts, through visual arts, through dance, through costuming, through fashion? These are all things that are very, things that the Italians have prided themselves on for generations, looking back to the Medicis, looking back to the classical Roman era. To say that we don't have anything that's for that here, I think misses, it's not enough. We need that here. And there are enough people to put together this idea with me to make it happen. And we're moving forward with that. We have just drawn together our board, and we have partial nonprofit status to be a fiscal conduit. And we are searching for, pretty soon we will be searching for grants. But we have a following in New York and New Jersey, and we aim to sort of expand our offerings and develop relationships with more and more art institutions throughout the city and the United States in general, because we do have hopes to becoming a national organization.
Wonderful. That seems to be an amazing venture and adventure that I wish you best luck with, and I would want to touch base maybe a year from now and hear about the many chapters of Piace throughout the US and the wonderful work that you will be doing. I'm sure, again, there is indeed a void out there that you're trying to fill, kind of balancing, honoring heritage with also and challenging outdated narratives that are part of last century, so to speak.
Right. Right. And again, not to dishonor those things.
No,
things
they exist, but yeah.
We want a place to play. We want a place to sort of express ourselves because we are different. Those things will always be a part of us.
Yeah.
And we're just going to move them someplace else because that has always happened throughout history.
Yeah. Indeed. I mean, as I said, even I think I might have heard you talk about, the festivals where you have processions, having a more creative approach to it, right? Would you envision something like that being
Yes, absolutely
in the making? It's not, it doesn't happen everything overnight, but, in Italy, for instance, if we look at right now the Carnivale is going on, so you might see the traditional elegant Venice, but then you move to Viareggio or Acireale in Sicily, and that's where you have the irony. That's where you have kind of a mix, and also the fashion designers. I mean, they have taken fashion to a way of kind of putting together style tradition with a little bit of sacrilegious. I mean, it's kind of a mix, right? It's a thought-provoking type of approach.
Yes.
So,
and I think there's always going to be, the act of making culture and making art in and of itself is a political act. I don't like, as a nonprofit organization, we're not allowed to get involved with partisan politics, but the word progressive is very charged. So, our job is to sort of like move this. And we're undoubtedly going to have people that like it and people that don't like it. That's the nature of going to art. And, me being in art school and having to stand in front of a panel of my peers with my artwork behind me and have to defend it, I'm used to it. So, I welcome that. And for me, you don't make an omelet if you don't break some eggs. I believe the same.
I like that. So one last closing question. So if you could redefine Italianità, okay, for the next generation, what would you include? And again, what would you leave behind, just to sum up?
I think leaving behind is something that's difficult to do. And I'd almost say that it's kind of impossible. Some things evolve to something else, but there's some sort of spirit that it moves forward into and transforms. I would say I can't name the specific things that will be included in it because that is yet to be written. And that is the excitement for which I think we should have for Italianità and groups like Piace that want to move into the future, is because we are here and we write our culture. No longer is it something I believe that it should be in a store that you buy. You don't buy your culture, you live it. So we need more people to feel as though they are living materials in which we express these things of old. And they will change in ways that I cannot even fathom. But I guess that in and of itself is the change that I want to have occur, which is more community and more vision for the future.
Yes. So, John, wrapping up our conversation, it is clear that your art is more than paint, pastry, or even AI. And it is a lens through which we can examine memory, identity, and the stories we tell about ourselves and our communities. So from the streets of Brooklyn to imagined Italy's, from the tactile pleasures of cannoli to the conceptual provocations of synthetic memory, you do challenge us to consider how heritage is preserved, transformed, and sometimes reinvented. And looking forward, your work and your initiative, like Piace, invite us to imagine an Italian-American identity that is fluid, creative and participatory, and one that honors tradition, as you said, while embracing experimentation and cross-cultural dialogue. And here, what you leave us with is a question as much as an answer. How do we remember? How do we belong? And how can art help us navigate the spaces in between? So, unfortunately, our time together is up, but I look forward to having the ability to meeting you in person in the future. And but we're gonna say arrivederci and alla prossima. And we want to thank you for tuning in into the program. I just wanted to ask if there was anything else that we should have talked about, mentioned, anything upcoming that you would want our audience to be aware of.
No, I think that we've covered everything. I'm, pretty much plugging away at Piace. We have our monthly, if anybody is in the Brooklyn, New York City area, we have a monthly party where you can come and hang out with fellow Piace members and meet them at Bar Louise in Park Slope, the second Wednesday of every month. And we also have a lecture with Marcella Martin, PhD, on Italian fashion. Yes. She's wonderful. And she's always supported the work that I do. And we're having a talk with her at the Calandra at 6 p.m. on February 25th.
Okay, wonderful. So for any of you out there, if you have any questions or comments, or if you have any topics you would like us to address, please contact us at italianradiohour@gmail.com. We would love to hear from you. And remember, if you or any of your family and friends have missed a prior episode or would like to listen to this episode again, subscribe to the Italian Radio Hour on YouTube or where you catch your favorite podcast. And also don't forget to share, because sharing is caring. So I would like to thank my guest again, John Avelluto. Grazie for your participation and art. Our sponsors, Istituto Mondo Italiano and La Prima Espresso. Until next time, alla prossima. Ciao, ciao.
Thank you very much. Ciao, ciao.